When I heard Chris's voice dripping with contempt, my heart sank. I was standing at the bottom of the stairs in our two-story house, a place that once felt like a refuge of love, but now served as the stage for my humiliation. "Oh, Mom, Vanessa really gets on my nerves," Chris's voice wafted down the stairs, heavy with annoyance. "She thinks she's the boss just because she's the main breadwinner now. It's ridiculous." I gripped the railing, my knuckles turning white. It wasn't the first time I had been met with Chris's disdain, but hearing him belittle me in front of his mother, Julia, was a new blow. "Well, she really has gotten full of herself lately," Julia's voice crackled through the speakerphone. "You should show her she's replaceable. Maybe meet someone younger and more fun." Chris let out a cold laugh. "That might teach her a lesson. She's so in love with me that she wouldn't have the guts to leave no matter what happens." His words pierced me like shards of glass. 7 years of marriage had been reduced to this mockery. I was Vanessa, a 32-year-old marketing executive, the one who had been supporting most of our expenses since Chris quit his job. And now, he was plotting betrayal with the same indifference one might use to discuss the weather. I stepped back into the shadows, my heart racing. The compassionate, kind man I had married had transformed into a callous stranger, but I wasn't going to let him continue this way. A fiery determination ignited within me. I wasn't going to walk away in defeat. Chris would regret every cruel word he had uttered. For years, I had ignored the subtle slights, the growing distance, the financial exploitation, but no more. As I stood there, a plan began to take shape in my mind. A plan to reclaim my life and my dignity. I waited until Chris hung up the phone and came down the stairs. When he saw me, his expression shifted into a mask of false affection. "Hey, sweetheart," he said, giving me an empty kiss on the cheek. "How was your day?" His casual demeanor felt like a slap in the face. "It was good, Chris," I replied, my voice steady despite the storm raging within me. "I just need to rest, it's been a long day." He shrugged, unaware of the changes happening right in front of him. "All right, I'm going to watch the game, so don't wait up." As he settled onto the couch with the remote in hand, I retreated to the bedroom. Not to cry or despair, but to plot my escape. My revenge. Chris had underestimated me for the last time. I picked up my phone and started making a list of everything I would need to sever my life from his. Starting tomorrow, I would no longer be the submissive, ignorant wife. It was time to take control of my story. The next few days were a masterpiece of deception. I continued to play the role of the dutiful wife while keeping up appearances, all the while planning my departure. Chris, wrapped in his arrogance, noticed nothing. One evening, as we sat across from each other at dinner, the silence was suffocating. He occasionally checked his phone, chuckling at messages. I pushed food around on my plate, my mind elsewhere. "Chris, do you remember when we used to talk during dinner?" I asked, my voice tinged with nostalgia. He looked up, narrowing his eyes. "What's there to talk about? You're not interested in my day anyway." His contemptuous tone stung, but I didn't let it show. "I care, Chris. I always have." He sneered. "Oh, so you were interested in how much I could earn, huh?" Under the table, I clenched my fists. "I supported your decision to quit your job, Chris. I just didn't expect to be the only one working." Chris let out a harsh, cold laugh. "Oh, come on, Vanessa. You love playing the martyr. The hard-working wife supporting her lazy husband." His accusation was absurd, but it exposed his distorted perception of our marriage. "I didn't see it that way, Chris, but I can't deny feeling lonely in this relationship." His expression hardened. "Maybe you should find someone who can give you what you need. Clearly, I'm not enough." The words hit me like a slap, but they only strengthened my resolve. I was no longer a victim of this twisted game. As the days passed, I began moving my belongings out of the house little by little. I opened a separate bank account and had my paycheck redirected there. Every step was calculated and cautious. One night, as I lay beside Chris in bed, I could hear his snoring. A constant reminder of our broken marriage. I whispered to myself, soon. The next morning, I woke up early, my heart heavy but filled with determination. While preparing to leave for work, Chris called out from the kitchen in an unusually soft voice. "Vanessa, wait. Are we okay?" I paused at the door, my back still turned to him. "We're fine, Chris. It's just the usual work stress." The lie tasted bitter on my tongue, but it was necessary. I couldn't reveal my true feelings when I was so close to freedom. That day, I finalized my preparations at work. I contacted a real estate agent and inquired about a small apartment in a quiet part of town. A fresh start, a blank slate. When I returned home that evening, Chris was sprawled on the couch with a beer in hand. "You're late," he remarked in a tone of accusation. I shrugged off my coat, keeping my expression neutral. "Work was busy, as you know." He scoffed. "Yeah, I bet. Busy being the star of the office." I ignored the comment and headed to the kitchen to prepare dinner, finding solace in the mundane task as a way to escape my inner turmoil. As I chopped vegetables, my mind drifted to the life that awaited me. A life free of Chris's disdain and selfishness. A life where I was no longer invisible or insignificant. We ate dinner in silence, each bite savoring the fleeting moment of this facade. Soon, this mask would crumble, and I would emerge from the rubble stronger and liberated. After dinner, while Chris lounged in front of the TV, I retreated to the bedroom. Lying on the bed, I stared at the ceiling. The room, once filled with laughter and love, now felt like a prison. But not for much longer. My plan was in motion, and there was no turning back. Days turned into weeks, and with each passing moment, I moved closer to my liberation. The mask of the dutiful wife was flawless, and even as my plans to leave became more concrete, Chris remained wrapped in his bubble of self-centeredness, suspecting nothing. One Sunday afternoon, Chris was lounging on the couch, engrossed in a soccer game. With deliberate nonchalance, I approached him, the rehearsed question poised on my lips. "Have you thought about looking for a job? It might help with our finances," I suggested lightly. He barely glanced away from the TV. "Why bother? You're making enough for both of us, and I'm enjoying my free time." His contemptuous reply stung, but it didn't surprise me. "I see. But it's not just about the money, Chris. It's about contributing as a team, working together on something," I pressed, gauging his reaction. Chris snorted, his eyes still glued to the screen. "A team? Vanessa, let's stop fooling ourselves. You like being in control, and I'm perfectly content with how things are. Why change a winning formula?" His words were a bitter reminder of how little he valued our relationship. I nodded as if in agreement, hiding my frustration. "You're right, Chris. There's no need to change anything." As he resumed watching the game, I walked away, masking the cold determination in my eyes. It was clear now, Chris would never change. He would never be the partner I needed. The following days were a whirlwind of quiet preparations. I secretly met with a lawyer to discuss the possibilities of divorce and financial separation. I documented every instance of Chris's financial irresponsibility, neglect, and emotional abuse. Meanwhile, Chris went about his idle days, occasionally throwing out caustic remarks, believing I was too weak to push back. But I wasn't that person anymore. Each of his barbs only steeled my resolve. The Vanessa he thought he knew was about to shatter his complacency. One evening during dinner, Chris's phone buzzed incessantly. He glanced at the screen, a smile spreading across his face. "Something amusing?" I asked, surprising even myself with my curiosity. "Just a gym buddy. We're planning to hang out this weekend," he replied in a tone laced with disdain. I nodded, feigning indifference. "Sounds fun. Enjoy yourself." Chris had no idea about my plan, but that weekend would be the perfect opportunity for me. While he enjoyed his carefree life, I would execute my plan. The day arrived, and I watched Chris leave, dressed flashy, excitement gleaming in his eyes for a night of partying. As the door closed behind him, I sprang into action. The essentials, things he wouldn't notice were gone, were already packed. I called the moving company I had discreetly arranged and confirmed the next day's time. My new apartment was ready, a sanctuary from the life I was about to leave behind. That night, I lay in our bed for the final time, reflecting on the events about to unfold. I felt a mix of fear, excitement, and relief. This was the beginning of my new life. A life free from Chris's shadow. Tomorrow, I would confront him with my decision, but for tonight, I savored the calm before the storm. The morning dawned bright and refreshing, a stark contrast to the turmoil swirling inside me. Today was the day I would finally break free from Chris's puppet-like control. My heart pounded with a mix of fear and determination as I prepared for the confrontation. Chris stumbled in late that morning, reeking of alcohol and arrogance. Without even greeting me, he collapsed onto the couch. Summoning all my courage, I walked into the living room. "Chris, we need to talk," I said firmly, breaking the silence. He squinted at me, clearly hungover. "What is it, Vanessa? Can't it wait?" "I'm tired." "No, it can't," I replied, my resolve solidifying. "Are you asking me about the state of our marriage and whether I am satisfied lying around the house?" "It's more than that, Chris," I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. "This is about respect, partnership, and trust, things that have been missing for far too long." Chris sat up, a mocking grin spreading across his face. "Oh, here we go. The perfect, judgmental Vanessa. So, what's your point?" I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the truth I was about to reveal. "The point, Chris, is that I'm done. I'm leaving," I said. His expression shifted from disdain to disbelief. "Leaving? You've got to be kidding me." I shook my head, feeling an overwhelming sense of liberation. "I'm not kidding, Chris. I can't do this anymore. I refuse to be treated as your personal bank account for your whims." Chris flushed with a mixture of anger and wounded pride. "You can't leave me, Vanessa. You think you'll find someone willing to put up with your control issues?" His words were a desperate attempt to regain control, but they had no effect. "This isn't about finding someone, Chris. It's about finding myself, finding what I lost the day I started letting you walk all over me." He loomed over me, his voice dripping with venom. "Fine, go. I don't care. You'll come crawling back. Just watch." Without hesitation, I looked him straight in the eye. "I won't crawl back, Chris. This is goodbye." I turned and walked away, leaving Chris standing there in stunned silence. My heart pounded with a mix of fear, relief, and exhilaration. At last, I was reclaiming control of my life. The movers arrived, and I oversaw the transfer of my belongings. Each item was a piece of the new life I was building. Chris watched from the doorway, his face a mask of shock and resentment. As the last box was loaded onto the truck, I turned to face him one final time. "Goodbye." Chris. I wish you all the best. His eyes burned with a mix of anger and disbelief, but he said nothing. I climbed into the truck without looking back. As we drove away, a new journey was beginning. A journey where I would be the author of my own story. Chris was now just a chapter in my past, a lesson learned. When the truck stopped in front of my new apartment, I stepped into my new world. A small, modest space brimming with possibilities. She was no longer Vanessa, the overlooked wife, she was now Vanessa, the woman taking control of her life. Settling into the new apartment felt like taking a breath after being underwater for far too long. Freedom was exhilarating, though the looming confrontation with Chris cast a shadow over my newfound independence. Days passed in a whirlwind of adjustments and anticipation, and then the inevitable happened. Chris's number appeared on my phone, and I mustered the courage to answer. Vanessa, where are you? Do you think you can just walk out like this? Chris's voice was a mix of anger and disbelief. I responded calmly, I already told you, Chris. I'm done. Our marriage is over. You don't get to decide that on your own. You're my wife, he spat, his anger palpable. I was your wife, Chris. And I do have the right to decide. I don't want to be part of a marriage where I'm disrespected and used. There was a moment of silence, and I could almost hear the gears turning in his mind. You'll come back. You need me. I couldn't help but laugh at the absurdity. Need you? Chris, I've been the one supporting us for years. I don't need you. It's the other way around. His voice trembled with anger and desperation. Don't do this, Vanessa. What about our finances? The house. You can't just leave me with nothing. That's your problem now, Chris. You should have thought about that before treating me this way, I said. Finally saying what I had been holding back for so long felt liberating. There was silence on the other end before he hung up. I stared at the phone, a sense of closure washing over me. I had finally closed the chapter on Chris. But I knew this wasn't the end. A legal battle awaited, but I was now ready to fight for myself. The following weeks were a blur of legal consultations and paperwork. I filed for divorce, citing Chris's financial irresponsibility and emotional abuse. He responded with a barrage of angry calls and messages, each more desperate and vindictive than the last. You'll regret this, Vanessa. You can't just throw me away like trash, he shouted during one particularly heated call. I stood firm. I'm not throwing you away, Chris. I'm freeing myself. And if there's any regret, it's that I didn't do this sooner. As the legal proceedings unfolded, the true character of Chris became increasingly evident. He tried to manipulate the situation, painting himself as the victim, but the evidence against him was overwhelming. The day of the final hearing arrived, and I appeared in court with a mix of nerves and determination. Chris was there too, his face a mask of defiance and resentment. The judge reviewed our case, the evidence of Chris's financial and emotional abuse, and my testimony about the breakdown of our marriage. The verdict was swift and in my favor. I was granted the divorce and a fair settlement. As the judge delivered the decision, Chris's face contorted with rage. This isn't fair. You can't just take everything. But his words fell on deaf ears, the decision was final. I left the courtroom feeling lighter than I had in years. I hadn't just won the case, I had won my freedom. As I drove away from the courthouse, I didn't look back. Chris was now a part of my past, a testament to what I had overcome. Ahead of me lay a path of possibilities. In a future I could control, I smiled to myself as a sense of peace descended upon me. The battle was over, and I had emerged victorious. It was time to start living life on my terms. The days following the divorce were a blend of relief and reconstruction. I had stood up for myself in ways I never thought possible. Yet, the echoes of my broken marriage with Chris remained as a reminder of the battles I had fought. As I embraced the peace that my new life offered, one night, my phone rang. Chris's name flashed on the screen, a ghost of the past. Reluctantly, I answered. "Vanessa, why are you doing this?" His voice was bitter. "Do you think you can just walk away and take everything?" "Vanessa, you've ruined my life." I took a deep breath, maintaining my composure. "Chris, the court made its decision. It's time for both of us to move on." He scoffed. "Move on? How am I supposed to move on when you've taken everything? I'm struggling to make it to the end of the month because of you." The accusation was absurd, but I wasn't surprised. "You're responsible for your own situation, Chris. All I did was stop letting you take advantage of me." His voice grew desperate and angry. "You owe me, Vanessa. After everything I've done for you, you owe me." I felt the sting of anger but held it back. "You took me for granted, Chris. I don't owe you anything." There was a moment of silence before his voice returned, lower but still laced with venom. "You'll pay for this, Vanessa. You haven't seen the last of me." I hung up, a sense of unease settling over me. Chris's threats were likely empty, but they were a stark reminder of the man I had once loved, now consumed by bitterness. Weeks passed, and I threw myself into work, finding comfort in the rhythm of daily life. My colleagues noticed the change in me, the newfound confidence and determination. I received a promotion, a recognition of my hard work and resilience. But as I climbed the corporate ladder, Chris's shadow loomed. He began a smear campaign, spreading lies and rumors about me among our mutual acquaintances. I heard the whispers painting me as the ruthless ex-wife who had taken everything. I confronted these challenges head-on, refusing to let Chris's pettiness undermine my progress. I had fought too hard to reclaim my life to let his bitterness taint it. One afternoon, I received a cautiously worded call from a mutual friend. The message was clear: Chris was struggling financially, facing eviction, and desperately looking for help from me. I listened, feeling a mix of pity and resolve. "Tell Chris I wish him well, but his decisions are his own." "I can't help him," I replied. As I hung up, I realized how far I had come. The old me would have rushed to help Chris, but I was no longer that person. I had learned the hard way that you cannot help someone who refuses to help themselves. I continued building my life, finding joy in small things, reconnecting with old friends, exploring new hobbies, and venturing out again. Life moved forward, and I was at the helm. Chris's attempts to drag me back continued, but they no longer held power over me. I had risen from the ashes of our marriage, stronger and more whole. One night, as I sat in my apartment reflecting on my journey, a sense of peace washed over me. I had faced my demons, fought my battles, and emerged victorious. The future was bright, and for the first time in a long while, I felt genuine excitement about what lay ahead. Life has a way of creating new rhythms, and my life was no exception. The scars from my past with Chris remained, but they no longer defined me. A promotion at work brought new challenges and opportunities. I thrived in the environment, growing more confident with every successful project. My social life improved as well, with new acquaintances, some of whom became close friends, and I even began dating again. Life was going well, but Chris's shadow continued to linger at the edges of my newfound happiness. One evening, during dinner with friends, my phone vibrated. The message was from an unfamiliar number, and I hesitated before opening it. It was from Chris. "Vanessa, I need help. Please." The words were simple, but they carried the weight of our shared history. I showed the message to a friend, who looked at me with concern. Vanessa, you don't owe him anything. Remember that. I knew she was right. I had moved on, but Chris seemed stuck in the past. I didn't reply to the message. Instead, I blocked the number and focused on the present. The next day, I heard news about Chris. He had hit rock bottom, losing his home, his friends, and struggling to find work. A part of me pitied him, but another part knew this was the result of his own actions. I continued with my life, and Chris's memory faded into the background. My days were filled with work, friends, and occasional dates. Life moved forward, and I was content. A few weeks later, I encountered a mutual acquaintance who still kept in touch with Chris. Vanessa, he's not doing well, she said with a somber expression. He's lost everything and is even talking about leaving the city. I listened, feeling a strange mix of emotions. Chris had been a significant part of my life, but also the source of much pain. His downfall was his own responsibility, the result of his choices and actions. He made his path, I replied, keeping my voice neutral. I hope he finds what he's looking for. As I walked away, I realized Chris's downfall was his own karma. He had chosen his path and was now facing its consequences. It was a harsh reality, but it wasn't mine to bear. Time passed, and life went on. Occasionally, I heard fragments about Chris's situation, but they no longer affected me. I was moving forward, building a life that was entirely my own. One day, as I gazed out at the city skyline from my office, I reflected on my journey. I had faced adversity, fought for my dignity, and come out stronger. I had learned to stand up for myself, demand respect, and distance myself from toxicity. I had also learned to forgive. Not for the sake of those who had hurt me, but for myself. Holding on to anger and resentment would only weigh me down. Letting it go had set me free. As the sunset bathed the city in a warm glow, I smiled. I was truly happy, with a happiness that came with deep contentment. One day, I met Douglas, a marketing consultant, during a new project at work. He admired my passion for my job and continued to reach out for occasional advice even after the project ended. Vanessa, you're talented, but sometimes it feels like you're holding yourself back. His words struck a chord. Perhaps I hadn't entirely freed myself from the experience with Chris. Everyone has a past. But those who overcome it emerge stronger and wiser. His kind eyes and gentle voice gradually put me at ease. Conversations with him felt natural, free of pressure, and for the first time in a long while, I felt truly connected to someone. Your experience will surely inspire hope in others, he said. Those words motivated me to start volunteering with a women's support group. Maybe my experiences could empower women struggling with similar challenges. That thought gave meaning to the pain of my past, making it feel worthwhile. When I think about Chris, I no longer feel anger or hatred. Instead, I feel gratitude for the lessons I learned through our relationship. Without him, I wouldn't have grown as strong as I am today. These days, it has become a routine for Douglas and me to have coffee together at a cafe on weekends. He knows about my past, but never sees it as a weakness. Rather, he views it as a testament to my strength. Vanessa, life always offers us new opportunities, he said. I wholeheartedly agreed with his words. My life was opening to a brand new chapter. And now, I'm no longer living to meet someone else's expectations. I live honestly, guided by my own choices. Sometimes, I'm amazed at the new version of myself. Decisions that the old me couldn't have imagined making now come without hesitation. The other day, a young woman I met at the support group said to me, "Listening to your story, Vanessa, makes me feel like I can change too." Her words brought tears to my eyes. Knowing that my experiences could inspire hope in someone else might be the most valuable gift I gained from my relationship with Chris. Now I can say with confidence, we all have the power to become the protagonist of our own lives. And it's never too late to realize that power. On my desk lies a proposal for a new project. It's a program to support women entrepreneurs that Douglas and I are working on together. Outside the window, another dawn is beginning. My life is also layering on a new chapter. There's nothing left to fear, because I've fully embraced who I am. This is my story. And this story will continue. The story of me, Vanessa, free and unbound by anyone's control. Life always presents us with choices. But now I understand. The one who makes those choices is always yourself. I am proud of the choices I've made. And I will continue to live true to my heart. Because that is the real me.